you know, this Monday night has become like one of my favorite nights of the week, and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm really excited. It's class 5. We're really moving along, and I think we're getting to some real solid um, meat and potatoes of Tanya. And I don't know if that's an appropriate term, but I'm going to go with it for today. I think that today's class, there's like I don't even know if we're going to cover everything I'm hoping to cover, because the concepts and ideas in this class are just, I think they're like, talk about everyday tools, which we've been discussing how practical and how real the tools of Tanya are. But obviously first we're going to start off with tzedakah, as we mentioned before, as we've done in the past, and we're giving tzedakah. We're giving tzedakah in schus of Paraleia, Basar Esther, Shisha Refuah Shalema, complete, speedy to full health, Karv Mamish, and everyone else. We should see healing and wonderful news. And it's, what can I say? Houston ladies, you show up weekly, we get to learn weekly, and it's really a treat. And we'll, God willing, be able to share this one as well. So and I'm not gonna, because I feel like every class we spend a little bit of time recapping. I'm not gonna spend too much time on the recap this week, because I think the ideas are so big. And we spent a lot of time like going backwards, but we know for sure that until now, the Ultraverb has definitely given us some very significant tools. All right. And we know we talked about, first of all, understanding even what's going on inside, the struggle, where it comes from, kind of being able to name what this internal reality that affects us daily and how that, plays out in our life. So we discussed that first. And then we discussed how the Ultraverb introduces us to the concept of Mayach Shelat Halev, that the mind controlling the emotions is a goal, and not just a goal, but it's possible, and not just possible, but it's a great tool to pull out of our bag when we're about to, I don't know, I'm going to use the term lose it, but go for whatever is relevant in your life. Go down the rabbit hole, lose it, react in a way that is not your best self, whatever it is, okay? So now moving onward, then we said that the Ultraverb kind of focuses on 2 different ways, methods to really be able to create effect of change that's more effective. And one was the long way, which takes deep work, which takes focusing on who I am and where I'm headed and what my goal is, that I have this internal bond with Hashem, this part of my neshama that's a part of Hashem, this love that's hidden, and I have to dig deep, and it takes a long time to get there, but the results are lasting, okay? Then we actually talked about the long way second. We talked about the shorter way first. And the short way is really, we said, through hispaininus, through meditation, contemplation, what results do I want right now? And we talked about that's kind of like tapping into spiritual adrenaline. And while that's great, adrenaline doesn't keep you, adrenaline's great for when it's Erev Pesach, or if when, I don't know, adrenaline kicks in when there is a crisis. Adrenaline kicks in when it's fight or flight. Adrenaline kicks in life many times, but a spiritual adrenaline is wonderful, but it doesn't last. It's the nature of adrenaline, in, out, over, right? And so we got to have more tools. So now that we kind of know, all right, now we know what we can do to create a balance, a harmony between what I'm feeling inside, which we talked about basically being my machshava, my thoughts and my emotions, what I'm feeling, and then what I'm doing about it. And that's machshava, dibur, and ma'isa. We talked about thought, speech, and action. Active thoughts, verbalizing what's going to come out, what's not going to come out, my actions. So we know that there's this constant battle, but we have what I feel inside and what I'm feeling outside are 2 different things. Like how I can behave and how I want to present myself, and what's going on inside may be very different. And that tug and that struggle and that pressure creates a lot of stress. Okay. And I think, think of how you'd act on an interview and think of how you'd act with a bunch of friends, right? Very different. And so that lack of congruity, the lack of balance, harmony, leaves us very overwhelmed at times. And so the Ultraverb is now going to face it. Now that there's the long way and there's the short way, and those are both methods that we've really expounded upon further. And if anyone, wants to go back, there are recordings. I'm happy to share it with anyone privately. Feel free to message me happily. Now the Ultraverb is going to really talk about the elephant in the room. Manya, these are wonderful tools. At the end of the day, life is tough. And it's hard to remain positive, and it's hard to remain focused, and it's hard to remain on top of things, and it's hard to have the right mindset. It's just hard. Life throws a lot of monkey wrenches our way. We're not in control. Take 5 seconds, look at the news. Don't look at the news. But if you do want to look at the news, I'm saying the world is out of whack. Okay, we see pain, we see suffering. It's not simple to digest what's going on. And so in this next few prakim, the Ultraverb will really focus on happiness. How do we overcome internal conflict, being down, being sad, being overwhelmed, feeling guilty, feeling shame, feeling inadequate? What tools does Chassidus give us to help us override and overcome, not ignore those realities? It's a part of life. It's a part of the human experience. It's on a very valid emotion on the spectrum of the human experience. But what do we do with it? How do we overcome? How do we navigate this? So what's interesting, it's really, really interesting to see, is that really the Ultraverb is going to kind of explain something which you and I kind of know theoretically, but it's a lot harder to live and do. That really, in essence, happiness is an action, right? It's not this happened, therefore I'm unhappy. There's a lot of choice, not in the position in life, but our disposition in life. And that's a really bold and big statement, right? I remember once hearing someone was, I think maybe it was Rabbi Jacobson. He was saying actually it was Rabbi Shais Taub. He was saying the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is things that happen to you. Suffering is where there's a choice. Now that's all really, really bold and really, really wonderful theoretically, but life really can weigh us down. If the news, of Yuri Dukes, Alav Shalom, passing on did not weigh us all down, did not all make us wave our hands upward and say, really? And there's probably a few other things that may have come out of our mouth aside from really. I don't know what, I don't know. So I really want to say a very massive disclaimer that this is in no way to pretend that the pain and suffering is okay. It's in no way to look at someone else's reality and be like, oh, you got this. It's okay. It's what God planned for you. Never. Always compassion, always understanding, always a desire to fix and help. But we do have tools. And I have to tell you that I saw 2 or 3 messages from a friend who lives in a different state. And then she sent them and deleted, sent, delete, sent, delete. So I knew something was going on. I said, ? She said, I want to wallow and I'm really angry. So I said, go ahead, wallow and be angry. Like the WhatsApp's open for you. And it started a longer conversation. She felt really broken by the loss last week, tremendously, as any of us should, right? And it was very personal and she realized, she said, it's bringing up all the feelings of losing what I lost my mother. And her mother also, there was a lot of faith and a lot of emunah and a lot of bitachon. She's like, where does it go? Like, really? Really? Like, lovely. But bottom line is, this is a reality. And so we had this back and forth conversation, and it was obviously super intense for both of us. But I think that this is those moments where I remind myself we have to try to live what we believe. And in these next few chapters, we're really going to find some of the big gems, the fundamental perspectives and mindsets and tools. And it doesn't mean we'll always be able to dig them out and use them, but we do have to know that there are tools. We do have to know that that's what we believe, whether it's easy or not. But the Ultraverb is going to get really, really practical and really, really challenge us in I think in the most amazing way. So we need these tools because, again, so far the Ultraverb has given us tools for how to live like a Beinoni. But the problem is the Beinoni has issues, right? The problem is life gets in the way. I can have really good goals. You ever had this day where you plan the day, you're going to exercise, you're going to make a healthy meal, you're going to stay calm, you're going to talk to your mother, and then left, right, things come your way, totally out of control. Before you turn around, you can't even understand where you're at. So we're going to be discussing the Prakim Chaf Vav through Lamed Daled. I think today we're literally just going to get through some of the big main ideas in Chaf Vav because they're so big. And what's really, really important to acknowledge and recognize that each of these concepts in Tanya, though Tanya is absolutely the building block of Chabad Chassidus and is what makes us Chabad, Chachma Bina Das, this intellectual approach to understanding who I am, my soul, my psyche, my journey, how it aligns with my journey in life, with what Hashem wants out of me, with my potential, right? So while it's very important to understand that these are the building blocks, every single one of the concepts we are going to talk about, Chassidus has so many sichas maimarim from all the Rebbeim addressing these themes. Because yes, we're looking at the big idea, but then we got to do it. And that's really hard. And every generation has its own challenges. So we got to try to understand, how do we use our emotions in a productive way to still get that Beinoni goal, to still get those moments where my insides and my outsides can align, even though I have emotions that are running amok, or challenges or crises that are really overwhelming me. And some days we're so overwhelmed with the sadness or the pain of Galus that we feel frozen, immobilized. We can't do things. I recall, 2 years back, 2.5 years ago, many of you may have seen, whether on our social media, one of our girls who, she was my right hand in my Chabad house, worked every day, taught my kids. She once looked at me and said, Manya, we partner on so many mitzvahs. If I needed a matzo soup, delivered. If someone needed a meal, she dropped it off. She was just my right hand. And her mother were tragically killed in an accident. And she was the youngest of 10. It was my entire Chabad house went into this like Shiva mode. It was such a loss for everyone from me on a very personal level, to my children, to students. And I remember that need to dig so deep and remind myself what we believe, because we had people saying, what do we believe? What do we believe? And I was just honestly, selfishly, so grief-stricken, so overwhelmed. Aside from logistically, she literally was my right hand every day of the week. Because she came from such a large family, the chaos of a Chabad house didn't faze her, right? She was the youngest of 10. My kids climbing all over her was natural. She felt at home. So it was a tremendous loss for me. And I remember almost having to pause my emotions, not to ignore them, God forbid, which we'll talk about shortly. How do we navigate this? Because the Ultraverb does address this. Don't pretend those emotions don't exist. We'll talk about how to channel them. We'll talk about how to tap into some level of logic when dealing with these very non-productive emotions. And I remember getting a phone call that weekend. It was a local psychology professor, and she had seen, and she's, Manya, make sure this week a bubble bath and a massage, lots of me time, self-care. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, could you imagine we have like a fire burning? There's a crisis. The students aren't eating, sleeping. Some of them were scared to go home to their apartments. They didn't feel safe. I took a few of them to doctors, psychologists. It was mamish a crisis, and she wanted me to take a bubble bath. I was like, no. Every ounce of strength needs to be digging so deep, not to, God forbid, ignore the emotions, but to remember what it is that we believe. And I remember saying to my husband, I really hate having to live what I believe, because it was so against how I felt. And again, Chas v'shalom doesn't mean we ignore emotions. So I think what we're going to see is Ultraverb is going to give us these insane tools that really help us address this issue. Sadness. What if I feel ashamed? What if I feel inadequate? What if I feel guilty for where I'm at, what I've done, who I'm not, who I can be, who I should be? All of these are, again, such real emotions that we have. And it's so, so important. And I say this when I'm teaching my students. Every time I get to these chapters in Tanya, I always remind the students, my students when I'm teaching, this is not a replacement for medication, for depression. It's not a replacement for a therapist or psychiatrist, but certainly these tools from Tanya can absolutely work in sync and be super compatible with cognitive behavioral therapy, with other things that we're doing to give ourselves help that we need. Because I do believe in the year 2021 or Tafshin Pei Aleph, there is no more room for stigma against getting the tools we need to deal with the struggles we have in life. It's over. We wouldn't think twice before going to a cardiologist or an orthopedist. We should not think twice before getting ourselves the help we need from doctors, from therapists, from psychologists, whatever it is that we need to gain. But we always need to have this perspective that we have already incredible tools. And that's what Chassidus gives us. Tanya gives us this. The Alter Rebbe is literally explaining how we could shift our focus so that it could affect, in essence, our disposition, our daily grind and issues, and help us reframe what we feel about what we're experiencing. You know, there's a story of a lady who went to the Rebbe and was like, you know, Rebbe, life is so hard. The Rebbe said, like, you know, we were not guaranteed easy. It was just not even part of it. And when I'm bringing sometimes with young high schoolers, and one girl will text me privately about their issue and this and that issue. Everyone's private because no one has issues, right? So finally I started saying in the beginning of the Verbringings, do you have issues? You don't have to nod your hand or raise your hand. But if you do, thank God you have issues. It means you're alive. Look at me, what? Everyone has issues. You're insecure? You have insecurities? Wonderful. You're a human being. Welcome to the club. We all have insecurities. It's part of the human experience. But if we don't look at it from this, there's something wrong with me, and we look at what can I do and how can I shift the way I'm seeing my reality, it totally reframes what we're experiencing. And I think that we're going to see that one of the main perspectives the Alter Rebbe is going to take from here onward is usually we think of ourselves, okay, there's Manya, and Manya happens to have a neshama, and the neshama happens to be a chelik elokami ma'amamish. I have to have a soul, happens to be a part of God itself. Okay, I have an animal soul, a godly soul. They fight, they're struggling, but no, overall, that's me. That's why he says, no, we're not bodies that happen to be souls. We're eternal souls, a part of Hashem, that happen to be in bodies. Let's right away change it and see it from the soul perspective. So for an eternal soul, a life of 120 years, it's not that long. So can we see things through a soul's lens? And in it, again, the fundamentals of Chassidus, and the Alter Rebbe is going to start off with saying that Chassidim, one of the main ideas is to serve Hashem with joy. You know what's really interesting? We know ourselves now as Chassidim from the Baal Shem Tov, from the Alter Rebbe, Chabad Chassidim. Before the Chassidim were called Chassidim, you know what they were referred to as? The Freilcher, the happy ones. What is it that made them happy? They didn't deal with poverty, Cossacks, pogroms. Like what? They weren't dealing with issues. They were, right? They didn't have Amazon Prime delivering whatever at their door, right? They had issues. But they were known as the happy ones because they were seeing life through that soul lens. And understanding that if I really look at my relationship with Hashem as this connection, as this bond, my soul that Hashem gave me, that's in this world for a reason, and that every single moment I could do things to bring light into the world, to do good, and, then you know what? Yeah, we should go to bed feeling very satisfied. Look how much light I brought into the world today. And we could see life that way. It's such a massive shift. But I think I don't think, the Alter Rebbe thinks it's possible for us. And again, remember, he didn't write the Tanya for people just sitting in a base medrash all day, eating a piece of crusty bread. He looked into the neshamas, the issues, the struggles, and said, I'm giving you tools. I can't meet with you one-on-one. You think only tzaddikim came to meet with Alter Rebbe? The farmer, the water carrier, the people struggling with chinuch, the people struggling with health, the people struggling with parnasa. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Human struggles, human struggle. The human experience is human experience. So What we have to understand is that we can approach life with a genuine simchas achayim, a genuine happiness. We need tools though, because it's all great theoretic, Tanya, wonderful, that's nice, but you know what? Life's annoying, people are annoying. I meet nudniks all the time. I have a plan, it doesn't work. My kids are driving me crazy. There's not enough money in the account. I'm worried about this one's health, emotional health, physical health, psychological health, spiritual health. I don't know. You list the list of tzaras. We could sit here today to tomorrow, just do that, but we're going to all end up depressed, and that will certainly defeat the purpose. So we're not going to do that. But I'm sure each of us could think of one or two things in life that stress us. It could be a boss. For me, it's not my mother and mother-in-law. I will absolutely certify, not just because my mother's here, but because the truth, and you all know my mother-in-law and my mother are women I look up to, and they inspire me to just keep moving forward in an awesome way. So they're not my stressors, but some people I heard their mother-in-law and their mother stress them out. Mine don't, thank God. Baruch Hashem, I'm very blessed. But really, we do have these tools, right? And we do have to acknowledge that sometimes there are things that are getting. So how does the Ultraverb open this section, this whole section? I mentioned it earlier, maybe in class 1, but it wasn't found there in that text. I used it as an analogy because I knew we're going to kind of dig deep into this analogy in this class. So the Ultraverb goes on to describe 2 wrestlers. And he says, okay, how does a wrestling match work, right? Now, in essence, the Ultraverb is not, giving sports update on wrestling, right? Because obviously that's not what the Ultraverb is using the precious pages of the Tanya to do. But the Ultraverb is using a muscle that is so, we can all envision it. And the Ultraverb says if 2 people are wrestling and they're struggling, when does one win? When the other one's fatigued. 1 second he sits to breathe or to relax, boom, the other guy wins. So the Ultraverb goes on to explain that for us, if we get laxed, if we're not approaching life with exuberance, with drive, with joy, with an open heart, if we feel weakened, tired, drained, schlepped, okay, I just want to say this. We're all going to be tired. It's part of life. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to remember like when I'm not tired. Oh my God. Did you guys just hear that? My Google just told me that I'm working hard and I deserve to rest. That's a little creepy. Sorry about that. I'll take that as a note. Should I ask it if it has tickets for me to Cancun or something? I don't know. Deserve a rest. Sounds good. Okay, but moving on, as my creepy Google is listening to Tanya, hopefully it's learning something. So the Ultraverb goes on. So how does this apply to us, this muscle of a wrestler? That whoever is feeling drained, weakened, they're not going to win. So Ultraverb says, with us, with you and I, what we need to do is really approach our own struggles from a place of joy, with an open heart, which each of these are like, just unpack what it means to approach struggles with joy and an open heart. But then the Ultraverb says something that I find so, I think astounding. And every single time I read it in a Tanya, it like almost like shocks me again. And the Ultraverb doesn't just say it once. You'll see in the next 2 more texts later, the Ultraverb is going to say it again. And the Ultraverb says to serve Hashem without, joy and a gladness of heart, without any trace of sadness in this world. I look at that. I'm like, is that even a goal? Like, can I really live life with no trace of sadness? I don't know. That seems like such a tall order. It almost doesn't seem human to me. Now, maybe many of you can relate to this. Maybe this speaks to you. Maybe you're like, oh, I got this. If you do, we need to talk because I don't got this. I think it's real deep work. But the Ultraverb says it not just here. The Ultraverb is going to say it again, without any trace of sadness. That's like, how is that possible? Right? And I feel like if you're saying this is even a goal, if the Ultraverb is even telling me that this is a goal, I gotta find, you have to tell me how, right? You gotta explain. And so what the Ultraverb is not gonna give us a mindset of like, okay, well, there's no issues. Let's Pollyanna and pretend there's no problems in this world. I don't think we're supposed to experience life that way. If we were, it would be that way. But the Ultraverb is, again, going to give us a logical framework. How do I have that energy and exuberance that I could wrestle through my struggles, or that I could live life without any trace of sadness or worry? Is that how? So the Ultraverb goes into two main perspectives. And I'm saying them as logical building blocks because they really, we could know them theoretically, but when we're struggling, it's a very different thing. And number one is that we have to remember that everything comes from Hashem. Everything that we see in this world comes from Hashem. There's nothing in this world. I remember students, there was something going on in the news. I said, ladies, I think I was actually not this election, a different election, and people didn't. This one was winning, that one was winning. There was depression, mourning. I have no idea what it was. I'm not even going into what political anything. But I remember I said it was a group of professors. And I said, ladies, it's not like yesterday Hashem was on the island, drinking a margarita and he didn't know what went on in this world. Hashem's involved in every single thing that happens. Everything. And here's the second big one, which I'm saying big one because I don't think it's easy. Hashem is good. Hashem is good. I feel like you say that, or if I say that, I feel like I have to really pause to breathe for a second. And I really have to let those two ideas sink into such a deep place. Because really, Hashem, I don't know. I look at Yuri Dukes as 6 kids. I'm like, really? Is this good? I'm trying to understand that one. Really? Everything came from you? This also? I remember in my conversation with my friend, this ongoing WhatsApp that I was telling you about. How do I tell her everything's good and it's all from Hashem? She knows it theoretically. She's still living it. What a living nightmare. And then the Ultraverb goes on to explain. There's revealed good and there's concealed good, but it's actually all good. Revealed good, we know the Rebbe used to, how many times did you hear, if you listen to a Sikha of the Rebbe, you watched a talk of the Rebbe, you read anything the Rebbe was saying, the Rebbe was always saying, Taiv hanira v'hanigla. We want good that's revealed. Don't give me theoretical, abstract, and the different ilamis through Seder, Hishtalshus, the different worlds. It got into this world, so obviously went through all those filters, of all those layers of spirituality, so now it hits this world. It is good. Beautiful. Okay, we're still living in this world. Thank you very much. Right? We're still human. But the Rebbe would always say, Taiv hanir v'nigla. We're asking for good that is revealed, visible. We want it with our eyes. I don't need a translator to explain how this may be good. And what's important to understand is that we may not always see what that good is. There are glimpses where I bet if we, had time or were sitting around a table, we can all share stories of when we thought there was a crisis or we thought there was a major issue and it ended up working out tremendously to our benefit, and it felt like a real dark moment and it really brought light. Or even how I had a personal crisis or you had a personal challenge and it ended up bringing light to yourself or to others. I bet we can do that. We can all think in our lives from a simple thing of, I don't know, missing the exit on the highway and avoiding an accident to something really, really big, right? We can understand revealed good and concealed good logically. Logically, again, like I said, this is a wonderful logical framework, but so deep to get to the place where you can pull this out. Pull this out. That young lady who passed away, one of the boy who had started dating her, it's not even to be believed, but we had to tell him that she had passed away. And the reason we had to call him and tell him in person, bring him to the Chabad house, it was because he hadn't dated in a long time. Because the first girl he had dated had passed away from a tragic car accident. And we had to tell him, well, if I tell you that right now that boy is a from Lubavitcher Bacher, you'll believe me, yeah? He is. And you know what he said? I remember the Purim after it happened, as he was starting to grow in his Yiddishkeit, or maybe a Purim later. He had a l'chaim or two, and he was crying. And he said, I always heard you read the L'tzarech Aliyah, darkness to light. He said, when I went through this two experiences, the second time I went through it, I learned about a neshama. I learned about a tafkid in this world. I learned that it's not for no reason that Hashem is there. He said, I learned that there wasn't just a random string of whatever, bad luck. He just returned back from Morristown from, spending 3 months in yeshiva. I'm not saying I'm not justifying, I'm not answering for God, but for this young man, he was able to see from that most darkest moment of his life. And his mother took one of our I have a mother's class on Sunday night, and she took one of the classes on class 8 where we discussed Chassidus and a Rebbe. She said, I finally understand why my son, she came from a very reformed background, actually now lights Shabbos candles from the classes, but mamish, very, not a very strong, empowered Jewish young woman, obviously a Jewish woman and connected, as precious to Hashem as, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, like obviously. But she said, I now understand, after learning Chassidus a little bit, some of the fundamentals, I understand why my son has never been so content and happy in his entire life. Can I justify? Will I ever say that was okay? Whatever, that's between me and Hashem. Let's just say, there's a lot of interesting dialogues. Hashem's a father, but this is what we believe. We believe that everything that happens comes from the world above. If you go to a child and you say, here's a, $10,000 bond, or here's a fire truck. What's a child going to say? Ooh, red, shiny, where are the buttons? Take this piece of paper, throw it in the garbage. I don't need it, right? In a way, we're that child. We can't understand. And we're not supposed to understand. We're not supposed to justify, because we'll stop trying to fix things and we'll stop feeling compassion for others. So I think that we have to, it's not about accepting tsaros. We say Tehillim, we daven to Hashem, we pound on the table, we talk to our Father, we absolutely do. And it's not about chas v'shalom being less compassionate, but this is a methods that we have that we can use to overcome what we're dealing with. Because you know what? Gullus is really dark. I don't have to convince anyone. I bet we can all share tales. We're all in the trenches to some degree or another. But ultimately, this is what we believe. And the next text, the Ultraverb says again, that we learn from our sages. Again, this is high level stuff. I told you tonight was going to be interesting. The Ultraverb goes on to say, we learn, in the Gemara it's quoted, we learn from the ways of our sages that we need to try to accept our misfortunes with joy. What? Really? How? I can't say this for someone else's misfortunes, ever. But the Ultraverb is quoting Gemara and says, Gam zu l'tova, this is for the best. Rak she'ena nigale, it's just not revealed. I don't know. You ladies, let me know if you figure that one out. But these are the goals. These are our building blocks. Someone accidentally unmuted. I'm just going to help that person out.
Yeah.
Hold on.
The timer's for you.
Oh, hi, Sarah. I'm trying. Oh, there we go. Taken care of. Sorry about that. Okay. These are the goals, and this is the way we are meant to navigate. How? We got to remember, theoretically, we got to store it somewhere in our brain, in our logical section. Everything comes from Hashem, and Hashem is good. And yes, we should absolutely ask for revealed good. If our Rebbe can constantly say, I want revealed good with my eyes, not in a different Ilamais. I live in this world. Please send it in my language without a translator. I appreciate it. But you know what? We do see people navigate the most unimaginable pain and sorrows with positivity. If you have not yet read the book Positivity Bias by Mayor Collinson, it's all based on the Rebbe's perspective and positivity. Seriously, we could have a whole series on it alone. Like I said, all of these ideas, each of the Rebbeim unpacked in a very deep way. And what I found, I think there were so many things that jumped out at me. I did it as a book club with some of my women in my community and some of the parents, students' parents. What I found fascinating is the Rebbe, if you look at the Rebbe's life, World War I, World War II, famine, moving from being refugees from place to place. His father was exiled. His father-in-law was imprisoned. Siblings died in the Holocaust. In the book Positivity Bias by Mayor Collinson, I'm happy to post the link in the chat afterwards, he brings up that, I mean, the Rebbe himself, childlessness, never had children. The Rebbe himself burdened the struggles and the pain post-Holocaust. World Jewry. World Jewry's pain came to the Rebbe's doorsteps. Aside from the White House, 770 got the most mail in the United States. And the gamut of pain and sorrows coming to the Rebbe's door. And the Rebbe once, there's many fascinating letters where the Rebbe is talking about a mindset and positivity and a choice. And one of the letters that I noticed in Positivity Bias in this book, there was saying that everything is a mixture of good and bad. The question is our perspective. And he gives the analogy that Adam lived in Gan Eden and was an ingrate. It wasn't enough for him. Medrash says, the Rebbe was quoting Medrash. And then you find the Rebbe says, people sitting in barracks in the Holocaust singing praise to Hashem. Go figure. How is that possible? And you know what I found so interesting? That the Rebbe lived this mindset of remaining positive and focused and nurturing, nourishing, and building on the good. Not denying that negativity exists. And the Rebbe told Beryl Eunuch, it was a conversation about positivity. The Rebbe said, I work on remaining positive every single day. Well, ladies, we have our work cut out for us. We do, but we need to remember these tools are ours. These are the building blocks. And I'm sure you've heard that very, very famous story, 1969, the first African-American woman makes it to Congress. And she was from Brooklyn. And some of the men in leadership in Congress wanted to remind her of exactly which turf she's in. And they assigned her the agricultural department. They were going to teach her a lesson. Take care of the farmers. Good luck. And the title of the newspaper was, Does a Tree Grow in Brooklyn? Like, does she know anything about agriculture? And she was heartbroken. Here she finally made it for women, for African-American women, 1969. Look at what was going on in the world, right? I'm told because I wasn't there, but this is what I'm told. And she went in, she got a phone call from the Rebbe's secretaries. Please, the Rebbe wants to meet with you. Now, she was from Brooklyn. She knew who the Rebbe was. She shows up, Shirley Chisholm shows up at the Rebbe's office. And the Rebbe said, I heard you're upset. She says, upset? I'm devastated. I'm so hurt. She knew exactly why they did what they did. And the Rebbe said, what a blessing you have. There are farmers with too much food, excess food, and there are mothers who can't feed their children. You are exactly positioned in the right place to find a solution. And day one in Washington, D.C., she meets a senator from the South. I forgot who it was. I'm like terrible at pulling out names. And he starts discussing with her farmers and the excess. And at her retirement, many years later from Congress, she said, if poor mothers in inner city America have food to feed their babies, it was because a wise rabbi in Brooklyn showed me how to see something from a different perspective. She's actually the one who started WIC, what we now know as WIC and food stamps. It's evolved to what it is now, but she was the one who started. So that's such an example of how we can, in fact, see she could have been depressed, stayed home, pity party, thrown in the towel, quit. I don't know what she could have done. We have perspective. And we can see that this is maybe where I'm at. And I have to say, when discussing this subject, I feel like a massive case of imposter syndrome. Because day to day, this is a struggle for all of us, for sure for me. As I'm trying to comfort my friend who's WhatsApping me, who's so, this last week's just tragedy really rocked her deep in her core because of her personal experience. I'm like, feel like a faker as I'm typing what I'm typing to her. I'm voicing it or I'm voicing it to her, because who am I to tell her what to feel, what to think? I mean, obviously I wasn't telling her, I was being sympathetic and whatever, but I think that at the end of the day, we have to remember that soul's perspective. And we have to remember that we do believe that everything Hashem does is for the good. And I'm saying it not because I've arrived, not because I find this an easy thing to digest, not because I'm at all okay with any tsaris that anyone goes through. I feel people's burdens in a very real way. We have students at our door. I would say 50% of what we do is meeting with students to try to help them. I'm not even talking about kashrus and learning kosher or lighting Shabbos candles. I'm talking about day-to-day emotional burdens. So I'm not okay, but we have to remember this is what we believe. We got to be able to pull this tool out. And I think what's amazing to watch where the Ultraverb goes from here. From here, the Ultraverb shifts to understand what happens when we're wallowing. Like, this is great theoretically, but then we get stuck. Then I have my insecurities that play into my head. Even if I could really digest the fact that everything is good and it's all going to be good, I have my inadequacies. Okay, so Hashem is good, but there's me. I got issues, right? I have my moral failings. I'm struggling with self-worth. All of us have some degree. These are something that, I mean, if the Ultraverb is listing all these things, he clearly understands that these are things that humans go through, right? And again, the Ultraverb shifts to give us, and I'm going to mention it, but I think we're going to really unpack it more next week because it's so big and it's such a shift that I don't want to like take a full deep dive into it this week. But in essence, the Ultraverb is going to say what happens when I am stuck, I'm down, I'm overwhelmed, I'm depressed, I'm sad about who I am. Remember, this is 150 years before Freud even showed up. Okay? Do you understand what the Ultraverb is talking to you and I today as relevant as 300 years ago? Maybe it's not exactly 300, but again, not known for my math skills, ladies. Okay? So ultimately, here is where the Ultraverb is going to explain. Pay attention to when those negative thoughts arrive. Pay attention. Check in with yourself. Oh, you're in the middle of davening? That's when you feel like, that's when these negative thoughts pop into my mind? Right away, the Ultraverb says, whoa, 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 whoa. Where is it coming from? Ultimately, what the Yetzer Hara wants us to do is to be immobilized. When we're immobilized, we're not, the Yetzer Hara is exactly where he wants us. I always say, the Yetzer Hara doesn't tell you, oh, go kill, go steal, go eat a cheeseburger. The Yetzer Hara says, who are you? What kind of loser are you? What kind of impact can you even have? Oh, what a failure of a mother. Oh, someone else, look at everyone else. They got their act together, their house, their life, their children, their grandchildren, their marriage. What's wrong with you? Self-doubt is exactly where the Yetzer Hara wants us. Wallowing in our pain, our insecurities, our inadequacies, perfect. Yetzer Hara is satisfied. You know why? Because then we can't bring light into the world. We're stuck. And a stuck nefesh elokis is way better than an empowered, energized nefesh elokis. To the Yetzer Hara, that is. Because to the negative energy, that is. Because then I can't be productive. Then I can't bring light into the world. Then I can't help others. Because I am stuck. So the Ultraverb says, pay attention to when this pops up. If, in fact, you're in the middle of davening and you start having these negative thoughts, put it right back where it goes. The Ultraverb says, even challenge yourself. It's fascinating to see. The Ultraverb says, even notice. Do those thoughts pop up when you're in the middle of a good business deal? No, chances not. Only when you're doing something ruchnius. So you know what? We'll end with this main idea because I really want to give some time because there's some big concepts thrown out there. The Ultraverb says, what you need to do is make time, dedicate time to revisit this inadequacy, insecurity issue that you're struggling with. Carve out sacred time, sacred space to do so. And you know what happens when you carve out time? Tomorrow at 3 p.m., I have an appointment with myself to focus on this issue. You don't show up for the meeting because the Yitzhar is like, no, I don't want you to get productive and solve this issue. I'd rather you stay in that wallowing, miserable place because then I got you exactly where I want you. So I want to end with this. And I know we have to unpack this big time. And next week, it's going to deal with guilt and shame and more practical tools. But I feel like today was a lot. It's a lot of big ideas. So ladies, here, I'm going to open it up because I know we always like to have a little bit of time to schmooze. I would love to know if you can either share where you have seen something that though at the time it was concealed, but it showed you more light, or maybe you could share that these are great ideas in theory, but this really stinks in reality. Go for it. Anyone want to unmute, share some ideas, any thoughts? Does anyone want to share any thoughts? Because I think, again, theoretically, these are easy. In reality, we had, like I said, that week that girl passed away, and not just that week, it was a while after. I told my husband, I hate living what I believe. Sometimes I hate the fact that this is, I was so angry. I was like, really? I have to live with, it was crazy because I had to take students. Me and 4 girls were supposed to go to Shabbaton. She was one of them. And the girls were like, we don't want to go. They were feeling miserable. We're going without her. And I remember I had to dig so deep to go with them, to dance with them, to take them to the aisle, and I just, every time I felt like that heaviness, I'd say, girls, what would she want from us right now? And they all knew exactly, come on, guys, you better go. Oh my God, you better not miss that trip without me. They all knew what, and I said, girls, by going, even though we're going against what we feel, we're actually honoring her. So any thoughts? Because I get that these reveal good, concealed good, this is big stuff. This is not simple. This is not simple at all. And I think that's why the Ultraverb is saying this is daily work. It's a daily wrestling match to understand these ideas. But these are the ideals that when we tap into and we could pull them to the forefront, we could live life with more joy and happiness. Because remember, unlike the American model where we're pursuing happiness, we know that that's not the truth. Go ahead, Gittel. I see you unmuted.
So in the secular world, one tool is to compartmentalize. We take these emotions and not let it overcome us, but put it aside and deal with it when we can. Is that the same principle that you mentioned, that you said make an appointment with yourself and focus on this feeling?
I love that you mentioned it because I find that so many of the tools that sometimes you'll see pop up in psychology, it's like, if we learn Chassidus, it was there all along. Because in essence, it's called Cheshbon HaNefesh, self-assessment. If you read Kriya Shema Lamita in English, there's actually sacred time every evening. Now, usually, I don't know about you, I'm mumbling it as I'm stumbling into bed, trying to remember all the words and not end up back in Ashrei, because somehow I always end up in Ashrei if I'm not looking inside. It's my issue, maybe not yours. And I'm trying to stay focused, but I'm not meditating in Cheshbon HaNefesh and pulling out a chart and thinking. But in essence, really, we do have that built in, creating sacred time and sacred space for introspection. Really, Shabbos is meant to be a day to focus inward. And I mean, we're just like Chalin Kugel, Kishka, Shul, what am I wearing? I'm tired, did I have a nap? But okay, we're taking care of our soul, our second soul. But really, Shabbos is meant to be that as well. So we have so many moments to align. We have Rosh Chodesh, we have Shabbos, we have the whole Tishrei, we have the Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Elul. Thank goodness we have moments, so many moments to do that. But yes, it is about saying, not right now. You're not welcome to take up so much space in my mind right now. I hear you. I have this insecurity. I have this inadequacy. I have this guilt. I have this shame. I have this issue. Like I said, we all have issues, right? But I'm going to carve out time for it because it's not going to steer the ship right now. So call it compartmentalization, call it cheshbon nefesh. Next week, I really want to unpack this idea bigger because I think it's within it contains such gems for like, and remember, every single thing we're understanding for ourselves, it's also for those we live with and we love. And even if sometimes we don't like them, we still love them, right? It's for all of those things to understand and role model. Can I role model when there's an issue to stay calm? I hear you. It's just this. It's going to be okay. It's hashgacha pratis. Can I role model? And you know what? Sometimes it feels very fake. I remember whatever I would call Yessi's Bubby, Bubby Shapiro. Many of you know her, very fond in the Houston community. Adain got there far. Thank God so far. She can't breathe. She's exhausted. She has a headache. This one didn't visit. She's lonely. Adain got there far. And you know what? It's like kind of one of those things that sometimes we need to fake it till we make it. Not that we're not making time and space for negative emotions. We must draw that line. You have to. You cannot pretend that things are not existing, but give them the appropriate time and the attention they need at the appropriate time. And the Ultraverb says, pay attention to when those negative thoughts come in. So maybe for next week, if anyone, by any chance, has any negative thoughts between this week and next week, Monday, if that ever happens to you, see some of you are smiling, so you think that that's maybe going to happen. Think to yourself, can I put you on pause and say, I hear you. I see you. We'll get back to you. Can you do it? It's work. It's actually possible. It is. And maybe next week we could talk about some of our successes. And maybe some of the times that we tried it didn't work. That's also okay. This is a safe space for us ladies. But these are tools Ultraverb is giving us. So if they're tools Ultraverb felt of value to lay in the foundation of Chabad Chassidus, using Chachma, Bina, and Das, using the intellect, we can do it. It doesn't feel good. It's difficult. We're not trained that way. But doesn't mean it's not there. So, we talked earlier. We have a treasure chest full of tools. What can I pull out and use? So maybe this week we could use this tool. I'm curious to hear. Like, this is homework, ladies. I remember I said this is no homework. It should be surprise. There's homework this week. I'm not going to make you make a poster board and a presentation. You're fine. It's safe. But maybe this is homework once this week to try to see, can I pause in a negative feeling? Because the narrative that runs through our head often is the most toxic. And I say to students, ask yourself, what you're telling yourself about yourself, would you say to a good friend? How about this? Would you say it to an enemy? Probably not. So we need to regain some of the control. Do you remember earlier we talked about how the Ultraverb is not going to buy this notion of I lost control, that we give up control? Remember how foreign it seemed in the beginning of Tanya classes? Now we're seeing how that plays out. So we have a lot more power than we realize. Again, not saying this is easy. But as we say in College Station, #life goals. It's goals. And you know what happens when we try to do this? We model to our children, to those around us, that they can too. And they also could put their emotions in check. That's a really powerful tool to teach your kid. How can I put my emotions in check? How can I feel something and not let that dictate my whole day? I had a conversation with one of my children who was feeling, children go through sometimes this feeling very miserable for themselves. I don't know. Sometimes I think as adults we do it. Nothing's working well. A lot of this, I'm that, I'm not. We had a whole conversation and we pulled it apart, a drop. And then I said, ultimately, this is something that's easier to go to this negative place, but it's not going to help you have a good day today. Okay, so you're not so good in school. That's okay. We don't have to be good at everything. I bet there are things you're pretty good at, and I bet there are things we can find ways to make school more successful for you. But do you want this to be how you see your whole day? That would be a shame. So we can do it for ourselves. We can do it for others. Always with sympathy, I should say. Even for ourselves, we have to have sympathy. We have to be kind to ourselves. This is the real self-care, ladies, not bubble baths and whatever else that lady was suggesting. Any questions, thoughts, or ideas? Please feel free, unmute yourself, jump in. Because there's a lot of big stuff this week, and I'm so aware of that. It's a lot of very big concepts that are way easier theoretically than in day-to-day life on a Tuesday when things are just not going well. Okay, well, if there is nothing else, we can always say good nacht. Maybe when we say Shema tonight, we'll take a moment for a little bit of cheshbon and nefesh. Maybe not. Maybe we'll just stumble into bed and try not to trip over Nagavasar, whichever happens first. So lovely ladies, we will see you, God willing, next week. We will unpack more. These are I'm telling you, these chapters are so rich. They're just so rich. It's stuff that I feel like, goodness, if we know how to pull them out and use them, they're just like mind-boggling. L'chaim, ladies, have a wonderful week. We'll see you, Mirz Hashem, next week.
Thank you, Manya.
Thank you. It's really, 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 it's a pleasure for me. I absolutely enjoy every minute of it. I hope you know that. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
It's a lot for what to be proud. Beautiful.
Super.
Beautiful.
Can you send me a link?
Continue,
Sure.
Nafis.
It takes a little bit of time for my techie to download, upload, export, import, put it on YouTube. My techie doesn't really get paid by the hour, so I just have to see.
Your son?
No husband. Thank
Oh,
God. Sons are in yeshiva. They don't have internet, but my husband, thank God, is the one who's gonna
Thank you. It's wonderful.
upload, download, do whatever, create links, hyperlinks, attachments. I'll let him do it. We try to stay in our lane. That's his lane. This is my lane. Good night, ladies.
Good night. Thank you.
It was such a pleasure.